No, things you didn't know that you didn't know, part 9. 75% of the mass of a human brain is made up of a substance called myelin. And myelin is made up 100% by cholesterol.
If we do the math, if 75% of the brain was made up of myelin, and myelin was 100% cholesterol, that would mean that 75% of the brain is made out of cholesterol. In reality, myelin is about 40% cholesterol, and the brain is made up of about 2% cholesterol, which means if every milligram of cholesterol found inside of the brain was inside of the myelin sheath, that would still only mean that 5% of the brain is made up of myelin.
I'll leave it there. On a separate and completely unrelated subject, Alzheimer's disease is a neurodegenerative brain disease which destroys brain cells. Now, Alzheimer's never existed until 1979, and yet now it is one of the leading causes of death in Western societies. On a separate and completely unrelated subject, margarine was first invented in 1869. It didn't gain popularity until the Second World War, when butter and other animal fats were scarce. It grew in popularity in the 50s, but by the 70s, the animal fats in it had been replaced with vegetable oils. Because obviously animal fats contain saturated fat and a lot of cholesterol.
Essentially, the conclusion that is trying to be drawn here is that Alzheimer's disease is caused by having low cholesterol in the brain. And when we replace the saturated fats and cholesterol inside of margarine with unsaturated plant fats and a zero cholesterol version, it correlates very well with the uptick in Alzheimer's disease and dementia. The first issue is Alzheimer's disease was discovered all the way back in 1906 by the man himself, Alois Alzheimer. The manifestation of Alzheimer's disease existed far before 1906. It just wasn't named until 1906. But even if the first case was in 1906, this is far before when this individual claimed it was, and far before we started removing saturated fats and cholesterol out of our diet. However, if there is any correlation between the increase in margarine consumption and an increase in Alzheimer's disease, the answer probably isn't the margarine. The reason is because the biggest risk factor for Alzheimer's disease and other neurodegenerative diseases is advanced age. And around the same time that margarine consumption increased, so did our life expectancy by an extremely large margin. Meaning, although these variables may correlate with one another, they likely have absolutely nothing to do with one another, and a much better explanation is the stark increase in life expectancy that correlates very tightly with an increased risk of Alzheimer's disease.
There. On a separate and completely unrelated subject, margarine is one molecule away from being plastic.
No. As you can see, margarine is made out of a myriad of ingredients. And if you were going to write a chemical formula for margarine, it would be so long it would be basically incomprehensible. The most common plastics humans are exposed to are made almost entirely out of carbons and hydrogens. And sometimes you get additional molecules that change the structure and function of these plastics. But the idea that margarine is one molecule away from plastic was a made-up idea on the internet that makes absolutely positively no sense.
On a separate and completely unrelated subject, I invite all GPs out there to check your patient's medical records and see how many of your dementia and specifically Alzheimer's patients have been on statins and or low cholesterol diets for many years.
The claim that is trying to be made here is that low blood cholesterol and statin medications increase the risk of neurodegenerative diseases, because cholesterol makes up a significant portion of the brain. Importantly, the use of statins reduces the risk of dementia and Alzheimer's disease significantly. And if you look at lifelong levels of low cholesterol, for every 1 millimole per liter decrease in lifelong levels of LDL cholesterol, there is a decrease in Alzheimer's disease, vascular dementia, dementia of any cause, and essentially no change in Parkinson's disease. Conversely, we do know that high cholesterol is associated with an increased risk of Alzheimer's and dementia. Therefore, if for some reason there is any correlation between someone being on a statin and having Alzheimer's disease or dementia, the more likely conclusion is that it was the lifelong exposure to high cholesterol that started the progression of Alzheimer's and dementia, and these individuals got on medications to reduce their cholesterol, but they didn't get on them soon enough to prevent the progression of Alzheimer's and dementia. In the grand scheme of things, there were many incorrect claims in this video, and there is essentially no evidence that low cholesterol is contributing to the onset of neurodegenerative diseases, especially because the brain makes all of its own cholesterol and does not rely on the cholesterol from the bloodstream.